It's great to have you all here in Seattle. I wanted to start with a photo from my past. It's a photo about 40 years ago. And it shows the only time that I ever graduated. And I want to tell you that I am more loyal to NIAS than most people in this audience. I didn't feel a need to get a degree from a non-NIAS school. Seriously, I had a fantastic education at Lakeside. I got exposed to teachers who really cared about what I learned. I learned about the world at large. I got to spend time with other students who were dreaming about the future of technology. And because an early form of technology, a teletype, was there at the school, it's no exaggeration to say that my career at Microsoft was completely launched during those high school years. And in fact, when my wife Melinda and I thought about what we should focus the foundation on, we thought about how lucky each of us had been. She also attended a private school. Each of us had been to get an amazing education. And the dream was that we could enable more children, ideally all children, to have an education as good as the ones that we had had. And so that became a major focus of our foundation. In fact, our activities in the United States are entirely focused around issues about education. Part of it is about teacher personnel systems. How do you measure a teacher? How do you give feedback? How do you use student input, peer input, principal input, test data, all the different factors, and create a system that identifies very good teachers and helps the average teacher get better and better. So that's one aspect of our work. Another aspect is the use of technology, and that's what I want to focus on this morning. Of course, when I was at Lakeside, the state of the art was a paper textbook, a chalkboard with sometimes colored chalk, not just white chalk. We had yellow, we had pink. It was amazing. And of course, a great teacher. Social networking meant that some of the students might get together after class, talk to each other, call each other on the phone. So it was very, very traditional. And even though 40 years have passed since that time, what goes on in a structured way has not changed all that dramatically. In an unstructured sense, kids certainly are using email and word processors, looking up articles in Wikipedia. But the formal approach to how we educate kids has not been that changed by education. I believe that in the next 10 years, that will change radically, and that we will look back on the way we were teaching today, and the fact that it was only barely technologically enabled, and see that we found a big opportunity for change. So what's the ideal? What do you want to aspire to when you want to give a great education? Well, one-on-one tutoring is pretty good. Here we've got Yoda telling Luke exactly what he needs to know, and when Luke looks confused, Yoda explains things in a better way. When Luke looks bored, Yoda tries to give an example that makes it interesting. I mean, it's quite amazing what you can do when you've got a sort of one-on-one teaching environment. Teaching is not about the access to knowledge. The textbook, long time ago, solved the problem that the knowledge is available. And so if a student was hyper-motivated, never got confused, they could literally just go and get the textbook. And of course, that basically almost never happens. And so teaching is making the material fun, relevant, going at exactly the pace that student wants to go at. And so how do we take the fact that we can't all have one-on-one sessions with Yoda? How do we use technology to get a little bit closer to that than we are today? Well, I believe there's a lot of aspects of online that can be helpful with this. After all, one of the things we do is we put lots of kids in the classroom, and so it's not as personalized. In fact, the teacher's not totally aware of where each student is, what part they understand very well, what part they're having a hard time with. If the teacher had a perfect awareness of that, the ability to split the class up into groups or to go back over material would be greatly enhanced. And so with technology, some of this personalization can be brought in. We often talk about students needing some degree of customization. If they're interested in using, say, mathematical knowledge in the medical realm, that's different than, say, in the construction realm or in the space rocket realm. And so if you could have a wealth of examples available when you're teaching a concept that motivate why that concept has value, then you could draw the students in. And in fact, in the world of technology, now storing an arbitrary number of videos is essentially free. And so the idea of putting things in context, making it interesting so that each student can pick the application area that's of interest to them, absolutely that should be possible. The idea of extending the class time so that if you've gone over something in class, a few people are having a hard time with it, if you have that longer day, why couldn't software orchestrate what that student is going to look at and try out, the problems that they'll be spending time on? And why can't problem solving be more interactive so that if you're really, really stuck, it's like a tutor who's going back and trying to figure out which part you don't understand and then re-teaching that concept to you so that you're not just frustrated by the structure of that problem. So there certainly is a lot of promise here. It's promise not in the sense of substituting for the teacher, but rather taking the things the teacher cares about, making that knowledge relevant, addressing where each individual student is, and making that work a lot better. Now, the different types of activity there's all sorts of things going on. A lot of it goes on under these broad labels, technology-enabled online learning. I went and pulled out some of the data. Here's just one raw statistic that shows the number of people taking an online class. It shows about 3 million, and that's a pretty meaningful number. You've got 50 million K through 12 students overall in the country, so there's about 6% who say they're taking an online class. Now, what's meant by online class varies quite a bit. They might be talking about a situation where the lectures are online, but they still meet on a regular basis, or they might be talking about a case where they literally never gather together in a classroom, but there's a group that's proceeding in sequence, and so they can share on a bullet board and discuss things. Or it might be the extreme case where literally there's no other students taking that course in the same sequence, so that person on their own is simply using online material to interact. We have to distinguish when we talk about online classes whether or not the amount of teacher time per student is the same as in a normal classroom and just delivered remotely, or whether it's substantially different. And in an extreme case, if you had a totally motivated student, literally the one who the textbook by itself would have been good enough, you can go and do it that way. So this raw number, 3 million, doesn't really tell us that much. And likewise, we all know that even in the non-online classes, there's a lot of technology being used, but exactly where that's being successful and what that means is unclear. Now, Department of Education did a little bit of work just to get a rough sense of whether this online or blended learning might have significant drawbacks. How did it compare? And this is the data they came out with, showing online is somewhat better, 6%, blended is 14% better. I wouldn't say that this is definitive in the sense that you've got to look at different teaching approaches, different subjects, different student groups, but it is very promising that even with the online material and the devices at a fairly early stage, you can see some promising results. And certainly on an anecdotal basis, when you talk to kids who've had this opportunity, it appears to be something that not only can provide additional flexibility, additional range of courses, but if it's done right, can actually improve the learning experience.